So welcome everyone to our webinar today on woodland creation grant opportunities in Yorkshire and the North East. I'm Georgia Evans, Land Use Advisor for North and East Yorkshire. Today we've got multiple speakers to explore the different grants that are available for small scale and large scale woodland creation. Just for a bit of housekeeping, a recording will be sent following this webinar for everyone that has been registered. So here is a quick little overview of the contents that are being explored today. We'll be looking at Forestry Commission grants covered by Jeremy Dick and Kate Hawley, and then we'll look at grants provided by community forests across Yorkshire and the North East. As well as that, today we've got Simon Rochester, who will be giving a great case study for us. There will be a Q&A at the end with a session, so please feel free to add any questions that you have throughout the session. We will answer them at the end. And the chat will be open, so you'll be able to upgrade different questions. And if you're joining on the Teams app, you may not have access to submit questions. So if you have anything you want to ask, feel free to get in touch after this webinar. And here is a list of different contacts that you can get in touch with. I'll put this up at the end as well to give you some time to look at these contacts. So as I said, I'm Georgia Evans, Land Use Advisor. I cover the North and East Yorkshire area. Any woodland creation inquiries, please feel to get in touch with myself or Nigel Patrick, who covers South and West Yorkshire, or Josie Miller, who is covering for the North East. As land use advisors, we are available to provide any advice, and that can include some on-site visits and audits to your land to see what would be potential options and best options for your specific land area. So for a very quick overview before we jump into the grant options available, I'm just going to have a little explore of why maybe you should plant trees and why it could be a good option. So there's a lot of progressive opportunities that trees can provide for your land areas, and this can include shelter belts, water quality enhancement, improved biosecurity, soil and nutrient loss management, and reducing flooding. There's so many depending on your specific land area. These benefits could impact the inputs that you put into your business and work in conjunction with your business. As I mentioned, land use advisors are available to come out, have a look at your land and have that discussion with you together. As you can see, there has been a significant decrease in woodland coverage in England, and I think the stat at the bottom there really shows and resonates the situation of tree coverage currently, with 46% of land coverage in Europe being forests compared to 10% in England. So that's enough from me. I will now move you on to our first grant that we're covering, and this is going to be covered by Jeremy Dick.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jeremy Dick. For those who don't know me, I'm quite a long-standing member of the FSC, and I'm a field manager on woodland creation for Yorkshire and the North East currently. So I'm just going to talk about the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, which is a grant we offer to pull together all the sort of information on a piece of land you're thinking of planting a woodland on, to check if it's suitable or not for woodland creation in advance of going for any sort of actual planting grant. The grant I want to talk about, a planning grant, this is funding to help cover the cost of producing a plan to the UK Forestry standard. That's obviously the industry recognised standard we follow. And the sort of unique aspect of this is you get dedicated support from one of our woodland creation officers. We have a team of creation officers in Yorkshire and the North East, so they'll help you through the process and advise you as part of the application. The funding helps, as I said, to gather and analyse all the constraints and factors about a site to check its suitability for planting with trees. And you'll sort of have there's a long list there of the factors need to be considered. Those kind of match what the different sections in the UK Forestry Standard, which is the same sort of basis for what we're looking to cover. For eligibility, this grant starts at 5 hectares and above. So we're looking at the sort of larger sites, and we have a whole range on our books from literally from 5 up to in the hundreds of hectares. So it covers anything of any scale, but helps iron out all the sort of complexities you'd expect to come across on a large site. It's 5 hectares minimum, but that can be composed of different blocks of land with a minimum area of 1/2 hectare, which is the sort of smallest area we consider a woodland, and a minimum width of 20 metres. We do include open ground and that's expected within the scheme. So you can include an element of that as well. There often are areas that be unplantable as a result of the constraints checks that you're carrying out. It's worth remembering, though, if you do intend to seek grant aid for capital works for actually planting the woodland and protecting the trees, do consider the minimum areas and other eligibility requirements for those schemes. We have our own UCO, the England Woodland Creation Offer, which you'll hear about shortly. But there are other grant providers as well, community forests and woodland trusts and people like that. So there are a whole range of creation grants to go for, but just to be aware of those requirements as part when you're doing this planning grant. If you've already applied for a UCO, unfortunately, you wouldn't be eligible for this planning grant, because this kind of precedes that process. If you go straight for your capital grant, you'll have to do all that kind of planning work as part of the UCO offer. So just bear that in mind as well. So just to mention on species and climate change, we're obviously very keen to ensure new woodlands are going to be resilient in the future. So we're looking for a good diverse mix of species, but they need to be site suited for the sort of climate we're expecting, in sort of 50, 80 years time. If you're not familiar with it, we use the tool, the Ecological Site Classification, or ESC. This is a forest research model that we use to put in the site factors, and it comes forward with a list of suitable species for the land. It's not fully comprehensive of all species, so we do sort of acknowledge that up to 15% of the area could be planted with what we've called experimental. Not, it's a dubious word, I think, sometimes, but it means other species that aren't part of the ESC list, but you may want to include for various reasons for your own personal choice. And we do allow up to 15% of those species as appropriate in the diversity. There have been some recent changes to the creation planning grant as a result of feedback from the sector and changes we sort of recognise needed making. So the creation planning grant does now include the formal consultation and the environmental impact assessment as part of the process. So when you end up with an approved woodland creation planning grant, that will include the EIA screening decision, and any formal consultation will have been completed as well. So that's a big advantage, I think, in terms of efficiency and saving time with planting grants is that will follow. It does mean we won't do that again at UCO, or if you're going for a UCO, won't be doing that work again. We will publish it on a consultation register for 21 days and include the county archaeologists as part of that process as standard checks. So that should be a big improvement. Those changes came in on the 11th of December for new applications. So this isn't retrospective on existing applications, but anything that comes in from now on or from we received before after the 11th of December will follow this new process. And what you will ultimately end up with is a Forestry Commission approved site for planting with woodland to the UK forestry standard. So in the actual terms of funding, we split the creation planning grant into 2 stages. Stage 1 is mostly a desk-based exercise, but not wholly. It does include site visit and some further checks as part of that process. But fairly generally, it's talking about gathering together and finding any relevant constraints or aspects of that site that will need to be sort of fully worked through into a design. So that's stage 1, and there's a flat rate of £1,500 for that stage. This kind of helps to de-risk a site a little bit for a landowner or a prospective landowner to look into the woodland a woodland project. You know, if there are some factors meaning you can't plant trees there, then obviously the process would stop there, but you do still have that payment towards the costs of doing that work to date. But hopefully on completion of stage 1, the site is deemed suitable for planting in some form or other, and we'll go on to stage 2. Stage 2 is offered at £150 per hectare, and that works up to a maximum of 30,500 altogether. So that's the sort of level you can claim on a very large site. So at the end of stage 2, you'll have this fully worked up design. You'll probably have 1 or 2 design options in terms of concept plans for your final planting design, and the site will have been fully appraised and all consultation and EIA completed. So that's the point where we go to approval. If it is a sort of smaller site, 5 to 10 hectares, that there is a minimum payment of £500 on the stage 2 aspect. So just to be clear that would kick in. You may often find as part of the stage 1 process that it identifies the need for some surveys. So we do include additional payments for surveys for things like priority habitat, might be priority species on the site, historic environment, so any sort of archaeological interest, may require further depth of survey to understand exactly what's on the site and what areas may need avoiding in terms of planting or can go ahead. We do provide a specific survey brief to follow in order to get this 70% of the cost of the survey covered by ourselves as part of the grant. So again, that's a big help because some of those can be quite expensive. And yeah, finally, how to apply. So it's open all year round. There's no sort of windows for applications. You don't have to be a landowner to take this grant out and have a look into a site. So prospective purchasers of a site can undertake it, but you would need the current landowner's consent if you don't own the land. But what we'd recommend certainly to talk to your local woodland creation officer in the first place, and it's really helpful if you do this pre-application, if you can. I think we can often offer a useful steer and advice at that early stage, and it's helpful to us to have a heads up so we can help you right from the start. Do please read the online guidance on gov.uk and then complete the application form for the Woodland Creation Planning Grant. And then for submission of the application, there's the web address there, Creation Planning Grant at forestrycommission.gov.uk. And just a tip from me, I would also copy in the Woodland Creation Officer at the same time you submit that form. Again, that helps us help you going forwards. I think that's me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. And if anyone has any questions for Jeremy, remember to put them in the Q&A. So next up is Kate.
Hi, everybody. My name is... Oh, I've got some echoing at this end. Apologies. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Kate Hawley. I am the Area Operations Manager for the Yorkshire and the North East team, and so I lead on all things operational, including both our Woodland Creation Planning Grant that Jeremy has already talked about, but then also our England Woodland Creation Offer, which is our flagship grant for woodland creation from the Forestry Commission. So if you've joined this webinar, I'm sure you've been very interested in how to create woodlands on your land. So the vast majority of what I'm going to talk about will be around UCO, what we call UCO, the England Woodland Creation Offer. But I will also talk briefly about our community partners that are also involved in helping create new woodlands in the Yorkshire and the North East area. So I'll talk about those at the end. Next slide, please. So first of all, what is UCO? What is our England Woodland Creation Offer? So this has been designed all around farmers and land managers. Back in the day, if you are aware, we used to have something called Countryside Stewardship Woodland Creation, which was our grant that was offered for woodland creation. That was sort of phased out in about 2021, and this has been around now since 2021. It's been designed with a lot more flexibility than our Countryside Stewardship Woodland Creation grant used to have. So it's now very much a sort of objective-led woodland creation scheme. So perhaps if you would like to create new woodlands for specifically for income, that's what you would like to get from your woodlands. You want it to be a source of income for you and future generations in your family, then UCO has a design and a contribution for that. Or perhaps if you want to diversify your landscape, or if you would like to create new woodlands to try and help wildlife or specific species on your farm or on your land, then there is the flexibility to do that. So UCO is a flexible scheme that is very much designed around the needs of you as the landowner. And it may well be that you come to UCO through the Woodland Creation Planning Grant that Jeremy just spoke about, in which case we will have a very good idea of what you want to do with your land and what that will look like, and what you would like to do. But you can also come to UCO not having gone through the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, perhaps if you're not eligible for that in terms of size, or if you choose to just come straight to this. And if you do come to us without having gone through the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, then our woodland officers, who are our frontline operational resource, and there are some on the call today, they will come out and meet you and discuss with you what is it that you want from your woodland, and then help you design a really kind of effective UK forestry standard compliant woodland. Next slide, please. Apologies, I don't have control of the slides. So just quickly around eligibility, very likely that you are eligible for UCO, but just in case you're not, you do have to be located within England. Scotland and Wales have their own woodland creation incentives, but we are not eligible for those. And the land has to not already be classed as woodland. So especially when you're thinking of things like a BPS land use code, or if you have what your land has been assigned by the Rural Payments Agency, it cannot be a woodland code. That would make you ineligible. We have a number of size eligibilities that you can see on there. I won't read them all out, but I will say that this is a lot smaller again than it used to be. We used to only fund larger woodland creation, but now we fund all the way down to a minimum block size of 0.1 hectares for UCO, a minimum total area of a hectare. Now, if you're on this call and you're thinking, oh gosh, I actually don't have a minimum area of 1 hectare, I'm looking for smaller woodland creation, then please do still stay on the call, because I will be talking very briefly about our community forest partners, and they do fund much smaller woodland, like really, really small woodlands. So yeah, do stay on. Please do listen to this and wait for that. So we can't have any existing agri-environmental grant agreements or other grant agreements. There will be a clash, so please don't apply if you have more than 5 months remaining on anything on that land. You are allowed to do joint applications across several holdings. So if there are several of you that want to apply for a woodland, it's not all on the same holding, that's fine, that is allowed. We do have the capacity for that. Applications are now accepted all year round. Again, for those of you who might remember Countryside Stewardship back in the day, it used to be a window that we would open, which would sort of try and tie in with the planting season, which of course is over the winter period, but now you can apply all year round. So please do bear that in mind. And we do fund native woodland creation, non-native woodland creation, and also natural colonization as a woodland creation technique. We fund all of those. So again, any kind of old-fashioned thoughts of the Forestry Commission and what we may or may not fund back after our behaviour sort of in the 70s and 80s, where it was predominantly conifer. It's not like that now. We very much go by the right tree in the right place, if you've heard that phrase, and certainly that there are many times when we are looking exclusively at native species, but then also non-natives as well. Like I say, we are flexible, and what the woodland looks like depends on how you want it to look. So do have a conversation with us. Next slide, please. Okay, let's just talk really quickly about the funding. I'm not going to go into loads and loads of detail about this because there is a very comprehensive website. So if you would like to go on and see how much money you think you can get for your site, then please do that. But here are just some high-level numbers. So we'll fund up to 10,200, very specific, the amount per hectare on what we call standard costs. So that's like the price of the trees, the price of the tree guards, any fencing that you might need for protection against deer or squirrels. So we will support the capital items, 100% of the costs of those capital items that you will need to create your woodland. And there is many more a kind of a wider menu, is the phrase that you said, a wider menu of standard cost compared to countryside stewardship, which of course was what we were doing before. And there is now this new higher maximum cap for standard costs. We used to only allow, I think it was about £6,300 a hectare, if I recall. That was the amount for many years. That was what we would allow as kind of a cap per hectare. It's now £10,200 per hectare, and you can actually have more than that, because we'll be talking in a second about what we call additional contributions within UCO, which is about incentivising woodlands that are perhaps close to towns or that have other benefits, recognizing that there are many different benefits of woodlands, not just in terms of the trees, but yes, in terms of location or wildlife. So you can actually get more than 10,200, but the cap is 10,200 just for those standard costs. And then next slide, please. So here is an example of some of those capital items that you will be using to get up to that 10,200. So it's £1.72 per tree is that's the capital item for that. It's £2.43 now for an individual tree shelter. I remember when it used to be £1.27 for a tree and £1.60 for a tree shelter. So these amounts have gone up. And you'll see there's a whole load of capital items. This is not an exhaustive list, but there's deer fencing. You can see there, £10.27 a metre, used to be a lot less than that, £7.40 if I remember, just a few years ago. So lots of capital items that you can get to create the woodland and make sure that it is protected, because that is really key. Of course, we do have quite a prevalent deer population, especially up here in northern England, which is where I'm based, around Newcastle and Northumberland. So very important to make sure that any trees that you create are protected, and we will pay for that. Next slide, please. Okay, I talked about the standard cost. So once you've created your woodland, you've paid for the trees from the nursery, you've paid for the guards, you've paid for the fencing. Here are some additional contributions that will also offer you, just to make it even more worthwhile to create woodlands. And a lot of these the funding that I'm about to talk about comes from the fact that government has this really large target in terms of woodland creation. We really want people to preferentially choose woodland creation over perhaps another use for their land. And so because of that, there are some really impressive numbers that we'll look at over the next few slides. So first of all, maintenance payments. So maintenance payments isn't a new thing. This is where we will pay you year on year once you've created your woodlands to then maintain them, beat them up, make sure they're in good condition, selectively thin, make sure that ultimately you end up with the best woodland that you can. But what I will say is that in the past we've paid £100, £200 a hectare for 10 years. We're now looking at £400 per hectare for 15 years. So it's very different again to even just 5 years ago, what the woodland creation landscape looks like. So it's very lucrative payments. So that's the maintenance payments. Next slide, please. We also have additional contributions, and actually it says here on this slide it's up to £8,000 per hectare, but actually it can be up to 12,000 now. I need to change it. So it's you can contribute to all sorts of those additional benefits that woodlands bring. So nature recovery, as a flood alleviation, water quality, public health, things I've written there. But there's even more than that. So that will be your eligibility for these additional contributions will be entirely based on the location of your woodland. So where your woodland is, like I say, is it close to cities? Is it not? Is it within what we would class as a high priority layer for priority habitat or for red squirrel management, for example? But then also the design of your woodland. So you will only be eligible for certain additional contributions if you design your woodland to be within the eligibility for that additional contribution. Don't worry if that sounds really complicated, because our woodland officers are very well versed in those additional contributions, and they'll be able to help you. They'll be able to help you make sure that you're making the right decisions and kind of maximizing the income that you can get. The additional contributions are optional, so you don't have to take them if you would rather not, but they're also stackable. So you can have one on top of another, which is why you can have, like I say now, up to £12,000 a hectare. It really can be lucrative if you are able to plant in the right place. So really, really exciting stuff there. Now, the additional contributions are paid as a lump sum when you've completed your capital work. So what that means is you complete the work, you buy your trees, your guards, your fencing, you do all of that, you plant it. Once that has been completed, at that point you get a lump sum payment, which is based on those additional contributions. And then, of course, the 15 years of £400 a hectare for the maintenance payments. So really, yeah, really exciting stuff. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So here is a list of the additional contributions. Again, I'm not going to go into loads of detail because I'm already aware that we're almost at 3:30. But very much around this phrase, delivering payments for UCO, the payments for public good. So nature recovery is all about kind of natural colonization, and that is split depending on if you are sitting in a premium layer, a higher layer, or a medium layer. And all of these layers, when I talk about layers, they're done on GIS. So you can look on our GIS system on Magic and on other list systems to see where your woodland sits. And again, the woodland officer can help you with that. We have a £2,500 per hectare payment for something we call keeping rivers cool, which is all about creating riparian buffers, so woodland creation alongside the river to help with all sorts of riparian benefits of woodland creation. £500 a hectare if you're improving any water quality, which is all about trying to reduce agricultural runoff. £1,000 per hectare for any flood risk management. Of course, we know that woodland creation is a really, really effective way of managing downstream flood risk. And so if you are able and to sit in some of those layers that show that creating woodland there will kind of hydraulically add roughness and slow the flow of water, then you'll get £1,000 per hectare. I talked about being close to settlements, and of course we want to encourage the general public to use our woodlands recreationally, both for kind of fitness, but also mental health and well-being. And so if you are close to settlements, then it's £600 per hectare. And then if you are willing to open up your woodland, so if you are willing to kind of be okay with people accessing your woodland, like I say, for some of those wellness and well-being benefits, then we'll give you a whopping £3,700 per hectare, which is all about supporting people to come and visit your woodland. But for that, you do have to open your woodland up and you know, sort of the challenges that come with that. But definitely very well remunerated if it's something that you would consider. Now, you can have all of those. You can have all 6 of those stacked on top of each other. Up to a total of, again, it says 8,000 there, it's actually 12,000, up to a total of 12,000 per hectare as a one-off payment. So, you know, really, really very beneficial. Next slide, please. I've put this in just because it shows that we've just kind of put our rates up for additional contributions. So again, I won't go through this line by line, but you can see what we used to pay and what we pay now. And there's been some pretty massive increases. You can see there for the flood risk management layer. So if you are, again, found to be in a place where creating your woodland will help with downstream flood risk, we've got a 100% increase. We used to pay £500. We now pay £1,000 per hectare. But again, some other pretty massive ones. That social one, you know, there was a recognition of some of the challenges and sensitivities that come with opening your woodland up for social access. And so we're trying to kind of remunerate effectively for that. So it used to be £2,200 per hectare. We now pay, excuse me, £3,700 per hectare. So really just to say that those rates are increasing. There are no plans at the moment to increase again, but we do know that inflation is a real thing. And so over the years, I'm sure we will consider again. But this was the most recent increase and it has been significant. Next slide. This, if you just tap through the whole thing, I was going to say, it's got this. So just quickly for the application process, you might be listening to this and thinking, gosh, well, how do I actually apply if I want to? So really quickly, you've got to register with the Rural Land Registry, the Rural Payments Service. It's online. If you haven't registered, I'd really encourage you to do so, just in terms of mapping your land. You then submit the application to our what we call Operation Admin Team, Ops Admin Team. So it comes into the Forestry Commission. They do all sorts of due diligence checks just to make sure that you don't have any existing agri-environment schemes on your land, making sure that your land is eligible, it's not already woodland, etc. It then comes to my team, which is the area team. So our operational delivery, woodland officers, woodland creation officers, field managers, it comes to us and the woodland officer will come out, speak with you in the field, discuss. You can submit maps, improve those maps, make additional changes that are needed. Ultimately, there has to be some delegated authority approval checks at the very end, and then the agreement is offered at that point. Next slide is another tap through. Just thinking about the agreement, what does that look like? So it starts when you sign and return your grant offer, and then you have 3 years to complete all of your capital work. So you've got that's 3 planting seasons to plant your woodland. So again, and that does have to be all of your capital work. So including your trees, guards, fences, but also things like deer high seats. If you have chosen something like that, if deer is a problem, you've got to make sure that all of that is kind of bought and completed and claimed for in that first 3 years. The maintenance period we know is 15 years now, so we'll pay 15 years at £400 per hectare. The obligation period is also 15 years, meaning that you've got to make sure that they're all kept in good nick for that time. Now, permissive access, this is if you have gone for the social and recreational access additional contribution, it's for 30 years. So you need to, at that point, provide access to your woodland for 30 years, so something to consider. But like I say, it is well remunerated if you would like to choose to do that. And then the agreement ends at that point. Right, I've talked about UCO and it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So I realise if you would like more information and would like to have a more in-depth conversation with somebody about what does UCO look like for you on your land, then please do get in touch with a number of the people that are here on the call. Like I say, we have woodland officers and then we have land use advisors like Georgia, who are all on the call, very well versed to talk to you about your specific circumstances. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. Now, I said that I'd talk about some of the other opportunities for woodland creation that we have in Yorkshire and the North East. We employ what we call a one-team approach when it comes to woodland creation. We would love for you to consider woodland creation with us. But at the same time, if ultimately UCO isn't the right grant for you, then there are other opportunities. So I've got here all about England's community forests. So they offer free and impartial advice. So please do go to them. If you think that that's going to suit you better, please do go to them. And they deal with all sorts of woodland creation, including some woodland creation that would be ineligible under UCO. So an example of that is there at the bottom, the hedgerows. You'll see that under UCO we don't offer hedgerow planting as a kind of in the main, it's something that we don't get a lot of. So, but community forests, you can get funding for hedgerows with or without trees. So you can see that that's an option. But then they also offer funding for low density tree planting, multi-use woodlands. You can see there very, very small scale tree planting I talked about if you are very, very small and you only want a little bit. Now, UCO does now fund all the way down to 0.1 hectares, but it does have to be an overall application size of 1 hectare. So if you have less than that, the community forests are the people to talk to. Next slide, please. Which is finally just a list of those woodland creation partners. Now, I'm not sure if any of them are on the call and I can't speak on behalf of them. So please do, if you would like to talk to them, do take a note of these email addresses. And they cover the whole of Yorkshire and the North East. We're one of the luckier parts of the country in the sense that we have a number of woodland creation partners in our area, and they're all very, very effective forestry professionals. So do speak with them. I do see that we have someone on the call. Hello.
I was just going to say,
would you like to come in?
From Trees on Teams,
oh, you're on mute. Have we muted everybody? Oh, we can't hear you. I'm so sorry, Claire. Is there no way to unmute? I am so sorry, Claire. There does. Okay. Although I managed to unmute. Was that because I was listed as a? Huge apologies. We actually, the chat is closed, but I'm wondering if you perhaps you could put something in the Q&A, perhaps just introducing yourself. Huge apologies that we're not able to unmute you. I'm not quite sure. We're having some technical issues at our end. but very nice to see you. Hello. Yes, so these are all of the community forests, and as you can see from Claire on the call, they're a very friendly bunch, so please do consider getting in touch. Yeah, and we've put there where each community forest covers, so do kind of work out which is the closest to you. Yeah, and then do you know what? I've talked about UCO, and I've talked a little bit about the Woodland Creation Partners, and you might be thinking, okay, well, that's all well and good in theory, but what does that look like in practice? And for that reason, we have somebody on the call who's going to give a quick overview of kind of a case study of where they did a Woodland Creation grant with us. And so I'm going to hand over to Simon, who will talk about what that looked like. Thanks, Simon.
Hello, everybody, and thanks, Kate. Yeah, I was sorry, I'm Simon Rochester. I work for Savills as a forestry consultant, and I've been involved in sort of woodland creation for too many years to imagine, really. Getting on older in the tooth. I was kindly asked by the Forest Commission to present a sort of case study, and initially it was a case study, but I've sort of expanded it out slightly. So I'm going to talk to you about specifically one client that we deal with, which was Harworth Investments Limited. It's a long-standing client of Savills, and we have delivered two schemes through both the Woodland Planning Grant and also then UCO, one of which was planted last year and one which we're currently planting as we speak now. So if you want to move on to the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, please. So, as I say, our client, Harworth, came to us about 3 years ago, I suppose, initially with two sites that they were interested in doing woodland creation on. Both of them in Northumberland, near a town of Ellington, which is sort of 20 or 30 miles north of Newcastle. And then they've also latterly, within the last year or so, have asked about a site which they've got at Rossington near Doncaster, which I'll come on to towards the end of the presentation. The first two sites up in Northumberland were both predominantly arable, although there was some grassland on the Highthorn site. And as you can see, they're of a reasonable size in terms of areas. So the Chevington North site was 65 hectares in size, and the Highthorn site, was in the round. We've planted we are planting 92 hectares of it currently. But the whole site we were asked to look at was in excess of 110 hectares, and I'll come on to the issues we had with that in a minute. Initially, rather than entering straight into the Woodland Creation Planning Grant, which Jeremy covered just a few minutes ago, we undertook basically an appraisal of both sites at the same time, which was generally a site visit and then a lot of desk-based exercise using Magic and the web browser to try and find out whether there were what constraints we may come across, and in terms of the challenges about taking the two schemes forward. And from that feasibility study, we also within the feasibility study started to produce financial cash flow estimates for the client. So obviously it's key to understand what potential grant aid you're going to get in, how much costs are going to be incurred to create the scheme. So that was obviously quite a driver for them, for Harworth. So the initially we did a feasibility study and report, which was given to the client and discussed with the client. At that stage, we'd already identified for specifically Highthorn that there would potentially areas which were going to cause us, from a woodland creation point of view, issues potentially due to bird nesting, and bird habitat, sort of a wetland habitat. So the decision was to go ahead with the planting further, and that we should utilise the woodland planning grant as the first vehicle to move things forward. Now, as we knew that Highthorn site potentially had high habitat impact with it, we pursued quite quickly with the Chevington North site, which was purely arable, so 100% arable in this case, grade 3 land, so low productivity, essentially difficult to work, heavy clays. So we moved forward with that, applied for the woodland planning grant, and we also applied for the woodland planning grant not too later for Highthorn as well. But as soon as we applied, we engaged with the Forestry Commission. Andrea was the appointed woodland officer. It was very helpful, quick off the mark, and with his assistance, we managed to get the woodland planning grant stage 1 done, undertaken quite quickly, specifically on the Chevington North site. And then, due to the potential habitat interest areas at Highthorn, Natural England were brought on board by the Forestry Commission. And I had several meetings with Natural England on the site at Highthorn, and it was identified that there was potential bird nesting issues on part of the area. So once the stage 1 and stage 2 were complete on both sites, the Highthorn site was allocated for bird surveys. Now I'll talk about that later as the impact that has. So the Highthorn one was moved forward with the bird survey. The Chevington one was straight into stage 2, and stage 2 went through the design, concept, etc., consultation, right through quite quickly. I think it was within 7 months we got that completed, and then the UCO application was submitted. And it's very, very useful, in my opinion, to have the Woodland Creation Planning Grant all completed and finished, because when you come to apply for the UCO, you can skip quite a lot of the tabs within the application form, because you've already covered those within the Woodland Creation Planning Grant. So it saves a lot of time. So if you go straight to UCO without the Woodland Planning Grant being in place, that can become, quite a long drawn out process. You're not potentially getting grant aid to do that element of it within the UCO only route, whereas you've received grant aid and support essentially for doing that part of requirement within the UCO, within the Woodland Planning Grant, if you know what I mean. So that was quite useful. The Chevington site itself, once that all went through, we went through the UCO, got that secured. We were able to start planting that in March last year, 2024. So that was all completed. So we've got 108,000 trees in the ground. The client's main driver for the site, or for both sites to be fair, is carbon. So the site's been registered with the Woodland Carbon Code, and through the calculator we estimate that we will be securing something in the order of 22,000 carbon units over the lifetime of the project, which is 100 years, which is what the client's main driver is for the decision to plant. Can I just ask you to move on to the next slide, please, if you wouldn't mind? Okay, so this is the Chevington North site with about 65 hectares of woodland creation on there, and it sort of gives you on the slide the steps that we've gone through. So the Woodland Creation Planning Grant from start to finish took around 7 months to undertake that. included all the planning, the mapping there that you can sort of see, and the design and the concept of the woodland was all covered within that period. Large consultation, as I said, with Andrea, the woodland officer on the ground, and Natural England to a lesser extent. Archaeological issues, not issues, but archaeological impacts were also found on the site. We've got a pillbox on the site and an old disused railway line, which were identified as needing essentially preserved, which was undertaken. We've also got, or have, sorry, priority woodland existing, and to tap into one of the additional payments which Kate covered earlier. A lot of the area on the western side of the property, was undertaken with native planting to satisfy the requirements for the additional payments for that particular element of it. So the planning grant, as I said before, was a very useful vehicle to get us into UCO and sort of almost fast track to a certain extent the UCO element of it. So the application for the UCO grant was submitted in September 23, and we were given an offer for the grant in early January 24. So sort of a 3.5 month period from application to awarded contract for the UCO, which then that allowed us to undertake the planting last year. So we've had 1 year of maintenance on that particular scheme. So that was the Chevington North one, which in essence was a relatively easy one, although of a reasonable size, obviously, relatively easy one in terms of impact and timing wise. So if we can move on to the next slide, which is the Highthorn site, which is literally 10 miles down the road from it. It's about 3 miles from the coast. So if those of you know Cresswell, it's that sort of area just near Ellington. So it's quite an attractive area on the coastline. On this map, you'll see there's an orange and a yellow sort of slither that comes down through from the north through to the south, sort of on an angle. Those areas are essentially wet-ish, rough grassland, which are used for bird nesting, no, not bird nesting, but overwintering and potentially some bird nesting. And it was identified by Natural England on the first site visit we had with them that was quite a key area, and they requested that we did a bird survey on an area with about, I think if I remember, about 2 mile radius around the site. So that can then become quite complex in terms of, there's a cost associated with that, obviously. In terms of the grant, you have to actually use verified ecologists, sort of approved ecologists by the Forestry Commission, and you have to get 3 quotes, and then they will review the Forest Commission, review the quotes, make sure that they're from people or companies, ecological companies that they're aware of and are used to dealing with, and then you can award the works to that particular company. The issue specifically for us is obviously timing. Bird nesting has a season, and you have to do that bird nest survey within that season, and you have to timing wise, and you have to have so many visits over that period, depending on what birds you're actually looking at or reviewing. So in this case, it pushed us a year. So it took, whilst we did the survey, got all the results back in, take account of what the recommendations are. Natural England will also feed into that as well and suggest what they would like to see on site or not. And all that has an impact in the timing of things. So unlike the Chevington North one, which we were able to plan and deliver within, say, a year's period, this one, by the bird survey being involved and the complexity of that, has pushed the timing out by a year. So it's taken, as I said there, like 17 months to get in. That includes the bird survey element of it, but it took about 17 months to get the woodland creation planning grant sorted and through. So the due application was in June 24, and the grant aid offer came in September. So about 3 months. We are now all the deer fencing on this particular site is complete, and we are now planting, looking to get to, completion on that this planting season. So done in a year in terms of the actual planting within the planting season. Sorry. So if we can just move to the last slide, I'll just sort of give my takeaways and bits and pieces to think about. This particular picture is taken on the ground preparation on the Highthorn site, continuous mounder there on ex pasture land. So in terms of my takeaway points, I'd say if you're embarking on any particular scheme, it can become quite challenging, and it's multifaceted. There's lots of different people that you need to speak to, that you have to involve potentially, and it can become quite challenging because from a forester's point of view, you're straying into things that, bird surveys, archaeological surveys. So it can actually, that's what I mean about being challenging and multifaceted. Quite a few things to think about and actually undertake whilst you're planning it. It's really, really key that you understand what your objectives are, because you're the landowner, you've got your objectives. So you might want, as Kate said before, to put a commercial woodland on there, and it's for investment purposes or whatever, or it might be for purely amenity. But you must be clear about what your objectives are before you start, because if things move on and you find that you've got a lot of constraints on that site, and it might move it more and more, say, to broadleaves, massive areas of open space, and that might then massively impact on what objectives and what you want as the end outcome of your woodland, for your woodland. So you really have to understand objectives and understand the impacts that are happening or will happen as you go through the planning process, because it might come to a point where you say, actually, it's not for me. I've had clients which they've pulled out of schemes because they've not been fully on board with what their objectives are, and things have moved, the goalposts have moved, or the designers had to move to allow for constraints on it. So understand what your objectives are and keep an eye on things as they move forward, would be my tip. You've also got to understand there are risks in these. As Kate's touched on before, there are habitats, there's scheduled ancient monuments. Peat can be an issue, but nesting birds is an issue to consider if you're looking at upland type planting areas. So all those impact and give a potential risk, which you've got to be aware of, and the timeline and expectations of those. In terms of timeline, the more and more surveys that are required, because they're time-use, that can also extend the length of your planning, which I mentioned before. And there is an expense involved in these. If there is a massive requirement for surveys and additional time, that all takes time, and time is money at the end of the day. So you've also got to be aware that keep a handle on the costs and see where they are going, and whether the scheme's still stacking up. Understand what your financial drivers are. So what, as I said before, are you looking just amenity, which is fine, obviously. Timber production, you might be like my client with Harworth, it's woodland carbon code units that they're specifically interested in, or you might be just happy with the grants, make sure things are okay. Early engagement, the Forestry Commission, absolutely key in my opinion, or the community woodland groups, if you're going to go down that route. Early engagement, the Forestry Commission, probably the first ones you might want to go to, because they're going to suggest that other routes might be more useful or more lucrative or better for you, if you like, with the community forests. But there are other people out there. Early engagement, if it's a high habitat sort of type area, your early engagement with Natural England also will be very useful. Consultation with stakeholders is also key. In the Harworth one, we did a couple of stakeholder days invited the local parish councils, fire department for things like fire plans. All very useful, and it all adds to the process of actually getting this over the line and approved for planting. And then there are some available tools which I certainly would recommend you use. I think they've already been touched on slightly. Is the Forest Commission web browser for a very quick, rude, rough and ready review of your site. You can use the land sensitivity layer within the web browser. It will tell you whether it's low risk or high risk. So that's a good start for 10. You might be able to say, well, that's going to be a higher risk scheme because it's, obviously in a higher risk area. Magic, that's quite a good way of getting information as well. And there are other sort of websites you can use to get information. But in a nutshell, the client's very happy. He's got about 150, 160 hectares of woodland. We will have by the end of this planting season in the ground, and we will hopefully have secured something in the order of 40 to 50,000 tons of carbon, for him, which is their driver. So that's it. Thank you. I'll just move on to the next slide. That's it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. We are running a little bit behind for the Q&A, so I'll just ask Rebecca, who's been keeping an eye, are there any more unanswered questions that we haven't got to already?
Hi, no, I think everything's been answered in the chat. So we could probably go back to Claire from the Community Forest if we've got a minute or two. If anybody hasn't been able to access the Q&A, if you pop up your hand, you should be able to raise your hand using the icon at the top of your screen. I can turn your mic and camera off just for any last minute questions. Claire, are you still?
Hi, yeah, can you?
There we go.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you now, Claire, thanks.
So we're quite lucky in our area because community forests only cover 20% of England, but we seem to have most of them. So we've got good coverage down from the Humber Forest, White Rose Community Forest, Trees on Tees and North East Community Forest. So there's pretty good coverage. The important thing is the ease of application. There isn't one. So you just basically contact one of our project officers or woodland advisors and we'll come have a cup of tea, look at your options. It's a very, very flexible process. We can fund lots of different elements, the sort of surveys that we've looked at, but also other items as well. We can fund 100% of costs. We benchmark it with UCO, but again, we can be quite flexible. We do basically a lot of hand-holding. We can help the applicant to co-design the project, do all the constraints checking. We can get schemes through EIA and basically give quite a lot of support. You can match it with Woodland Carbon Code, private funding and basic payments. There's potentially further funding for ecosystem services that we've looked at with UCO. And there's also funding for aftercare. But the main thing is the ease of application and the flexibility. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire, for that. And sorry we couldn't hear you earlier.
It's okay.
If there are any more questions, please put your hands up.
There is actually one from Carol, which is, will community forest projects help with the woodland planning grant?
You can apply for woodland planning grant before you come for community forest funding, and yes, we support that. We can help with that, certainly.
Great, thank you, Claire. Any more questions at all?
No, that's everything. Oh,
fantastic.
Sorry, there is one more. Why would community forest projects be better than Forestry Commission grants?
Ooh. It's down to that sort of flexibility. So covering, tiny sites, hedgerows that we've already mentioned, wood pasture, some items that maybe aren't eligible under UCO, that really sort of support and hand-holding. and, you know, that sort of ease of application. It's the flexibility really that I think, and the sort of simple process is one of the advantages.
Thanks, Claire. So Tim, do you want to come on mic? You have your hand up.
Yes, just to say the Great Northumberland Forest, our grants are full for new creation this year and next, because we have a big pipeline. But we do offer a free service where one of us can come out and do your initial UCO scoping, and in some cases we'll even fill in the application form for you free of charge. So if you're based in Northumberland, you're interested in UCO, please do get in touch at our email address, which was on the slide deck.
Thanks.
I am sorry, just to jump in quickly, just to say that like I really think that the reality is that there are all of these grants are very flexible depending on your needs. Like I'm always very reticent to sort of say that one is better than the other. Like they're just all slightly different and they have slightly different objectives. You know, and like I say, in the Forestry Commission, we try and take this one team approach. Like the most important thing is about getting the trees in the ground and contributing to that target. And for some individuals, the community forest grants are better with that kind of additional hand holding and support. And then for others, UCO may be a better option with some of those additional contributions and the financial additions. So it's very much sort of lots of things on the table, and most important thing is that you are considering it at all, as opposed to kind of which one you go with. But we're very, very grateful for our community forest partners for kind of supplementing that and really contributing hugely to our woodland creation targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we have run over by 2 minutes, so I will call this to an end. Thank you to all of our speakers and for everyone for watching. And as I mentioned earlier, a recording will be sent to anyone who is registered, so you can watch this back if you've missed anything at all. Thank you very much.